What if Ben Solo never turned to the dark side? What would the galaxy have looked like by the time the sequel trilogy rolled around? What would Snoke and Palpatine have done to alter their plans? In this video, I'm going to lay out one way Luke could have prevented Ben's turn to the dark side, and how that would have drastically shifted the course of everyone's lives going forward. When we first meet Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens, we are presented with an intimidating and seemingly heartless individual. But as the movie progresses, we come to learn that he is actually one of the more conflicted characters we have ever seen in the Star Wars universe. In The Last Jedi, we learn that his turn to the dark side, while facilitated by Palpatine, was actually finished by his uncle, Luke Skywalker, as Luke enters Ben's sleeping quarters and ignites his lightsaber in what Ben perceives as an attempt to kill him. But what if this scene had played out differently? What if when Luke saw the darkness in his nephew's mind, he took it upon himself to prevent his young apprentice from ever turning? Not by acting on his initial instinct to kill him, but by vowing to discover the root of the conflict in Ben Solo's mind, and teaching him more about Anakin Skywalker and how the dark side manipulated his perception of reality. So in this scenario, I'll pick up in that scene. After seeing all the terrible things going on in Ben's mind, Luke would exit the room and head to his meditation rock. He would then reach out to his father for guidance on how to proceed with young Solo. Anakin would give his son advice and provide more insight into what Ben was going through. So the next morning, as Ben awakens and heads for the Jedi Temple as he usually did, Luke would be waiting for him outside. From there, the two of them, along with the other Jedi students, would leave. They would travel the galaxy, exploring different Jedi and Sith temples, which would expand their knowledge of both sides of the Force. Luke would pay special attention to Ben, taking him under his wing even more than before, and giving him further explanations on the relics and artifacts they encountered. By this point, Luke would have made it clear that while he would train all students to become Jedi Knights, Ben was the heir to the Jedi legacy. He had already established himself as the strongest, most promising student in the Academy. There was a good chance he would succeed Luke Skywalker as the next Grand Master of the Jedi Order. And everyone knew Ben was the grandson of the Chosen One. So Luke's decision to take Ben under his wing as his fully fledged Jedi apprentice would not be a shocking or demeaning decision for the other Padawans. There may be some jealousy and some gossip among them, as is to be expected with young men and women who are growing up together and competing with one another. But Luke would have a strong influence on his students and establish deep personal connections with each of them. They would respect his decision and continue to grow and learn at their own pace. The group would travel to familiar locations such as Coruscant and Vader's castle on Mustafar. These locations were no coincidence. Luke was guiding his students to locations strong in both sides of the Force, to test their commitment to the light, and to give Ben a better understanding of his grandfather's journey. As time went on, Ben would grow more open to sharing his inner turmoil with his uncle, so Luke would be well aware of Snoke and his continuous attempts to turn Ben to the dark side. What Ben doesn't know is that this journey they are on has another purpose. By the guidance of the Force and by the experiences Ben shares with him, Luke is following clues to unravel the truth behind his nephew's conflict. Slowly but surely, he is getting closer and closer to finding Snoke, until one day, while below Vader's castle on Mustafar, Luke finds a Sith holocron, which leads to a planet he is not familiar with. Ben and the other students had grown strong over this 3-month journey. They had learned a lot, but there were still so many things they didn't understand. Were they ready to face an evil as great as Snoke? Luke hadn't met this creature of the dark side yet, but he could sense his strength. Everything Ben had told him, and everywhere they traveled that Snoke had once been, reeked of dark power. No. Luke was confident enough in his own abilities, but his followers were not ready to join him. At least not most of them. The next day, they would leave Mustafar and return to the training temple. Luke communicated with Leia and asked that she come to watch over the students who would not be coming with him. They had been left alone before and been just fine. They were all in their late teens and there was no reason they couldn't handle themselves. But Luke sensed something unusual. The Force had been unpredictable lately. Something big was about to happen. Better safe than sorry. Leia arrived with C-3PO and a young girl. She couldn't have been over 10 years old. From the moment they had exited hyperspace, Luke sensed her. Ben felt it too, and Luke suddenly noticed a rush of nervous energy come over his apprentice. He wasn't sure why. In fact, Ben didn't even know what was causing his sudden anxiety. But something on that ship was making him uneasy. They were both there, waiting for the group to land. Leia ran off the ship to embrace her son, and then Luke, whose gaze was fixated on the little girl standing in the doorway of the ship. "Who's the girl?" Luke asked. Leia, taken a bit off guard by her brother's lack of emotion, glanced at the girl, and then back at him. "I found her a couple of months ago. The Force brought us together. I can explain, but..." Luke finished her thought. "We don't have time." He began to approach the ship, but the young girl stepped back inside and out of Luke's view. He smiled slightly, thought for a moment, and then turned back to give his sister a proper greeting. When Leia questioned why Ben should go with Luke to face Snoke, Luke explained that he needed to confront his fear in order to destroy it, while also knowing in the back of his head that he was going to need his nephew if he was going to be successful. So after a brief introduction of Leia to the Jedi students, Luke, Ben, and one other Padawan leave to confront Snoke. Immediately upon their arrival, Luke feels uneasy. He senses something unusual. There was something off about this place. Something familiar. As the trio moved through the wide corridors of the Sith Temple, they heard voices echoing off the walls, and a quiet humming of machinery Luke couldn't identify. He continued to follow his instincts through the temple until he realized there was only one person still following him. Ben had been stopped cold. He was trembling. He didn't need to enter that room to know what was inside. Luke and the other student tracked backwards to rejoin Ben as he said, "He's in there." Luke stepped over to meet Ben's eyes as he spoke. "It's time. Now be brave, and don't look back." Ben nodded as a look of newfound confidence buried the terrified look he had just a second before. The three of them entered the dark room, which was immediately filled with laughter. Luke and his other student, Vo, didn't know where it was coming from. Lightsabers ignited, they looked around, confused and intimidated. But Ben's eyes were locked dead ahead. He continued to walk forward until the room was suddenly filled with light. There he was. Snoke towered over them. He was old, but that wasn't reflected in the way he moved. He didn't appear how we saw him in the sequel trilogy. There was no gaping hole in his face, no limp in his walk. "Welcome, my young apprentice. I asked you to come alone. You leave me no choice but to make the proper adjustments." Suddenly, before anyone has time to react, Vo is struck with a shot of force lightning so strong that it sent her out of the room they were in, through a wall, and into an abyss behind them. Luke felt the life force leave. Just like that, one of his best students was gone. The next shot of lightning came toward him, but Luke was no Padawan. He was all too familiar with this sort of power. He lifted his saber to absorb the shock with ease. A few moments of conversation and testing each other's limits ensued, until things escalated. An all-out fight for their lives begins, as Snoke effortlessly denies attacks from Ben and Luke's sabers with the Force. He doesn't even wield a lightsaber. As the fight wages on, Luke begins to realize that Snoke isn't fighting for blood. His goal is not to kill Ben. He needs him alive. And he can't kill Luke without good reason, as it will likely turn Ben against him even more. Skywalker's interference with Snoke's plan has made things more difficult than before. He must proceed carefully. But Luke isn't necessarily here to kill either. He's here for answers. If Snoke leaves him no choice, then he'll do what he has to do. But death is not the only way this can end. "I thought we understood each other, Ben. Not long ago you seemed committed to the dark side, to finishing what Lord Vader could not." Luke felt the conflict in his apprentice growing, but he had anticipated this would happen. Ben needed to be tested as Luke and Anakin were before him. He needed to see... Bang. Suddenly, Luke was sent flying across the room as he slammed into the wall, and lightning followed. He couldn't stop it this time. He absorbed it all and was then raised into the air. Ben had to decide now. Let his uncle die and join Snoke to follow in his grandfather's footsteps, or destroy Snoke and protect his family and the galaxy from the evil that was sure to come. Snoke held Luke's lifeless body in the air as he raised a finger to send him toward the pit. But he couldn't. Skywalker's body didn't move. Snoke slowly turned his head to see Ben's outstretched arm holding his uncle in place.
"You have too much of your father's heart in you, young son."
He shocked Ben with lightning, knocking him out cold as he proceeded. But he failed once again. Luke raised his head. Luke had seen what he came here for. Ben Solo chose the light. The vision was wrong. His decision wasn't made. Against Snoke's best efforts, Luke descended back to the ground and attacked. Snoke sent more force lightning Luke's way, but Luke deflected it with ease. They traded shots of their best force abilities. The walls around them were crumbling as they swirled around the room. Luke glanced to the corner of the room to see Ben had awakened. They locked eyes for the briefest moment, and immediately understood each other. As Snoke swung Luke's lightsaber, Luke suddenly sent him flying with a force the Dark Lord had never encountered. As Ben used the force to raise his lightsaber high into the air, and ignite it, it plunged through Snoke's body as he was split in two and abruptly fell to the ground. Uncle and nephew shared a sigh of relief when they heard another sinister laugh from the shadows. They suddenly had no control over their own bodies. Luke hadn't felt this helpless since... No, it couldn't be. He was dead. The walls that once surrounded them had been destroyed in battle, allowing the Jedi Master to quickly confirm his worst fear, as he saw Darth Sidious, suspended in the air above them. Alright, so I'm going to end this video here because I don't want it to run too long, and I'll finish the story in another video. Please let me know what you guys thought about this one in the comments section below, leave a thumbs up to support the channel, and may the Force be with you, always.